All right, so this is part 2 of leadership and field command from start to finish. This next part is going to be all about preparation. If you are leading an army, one of your number one objectives needs to be winning every fight that you are going to go against before anybody steps foot on the field or even shows up in an event. A lot of people don't think of it that way. The really obvious portion of field command is when you are yelling commands at the group, and that's going to be the third section of this. But for the most part, the battle has already been decided by the time that people are yelling commands at each other. You can tune a battle one way or another via that. But in the 3 years that I was commanding, and then the 2 subsequent Battle for the Ring general battles, those were won before anybody stepped foot on the field. The first portion of preparing an army to win is recruitment. So, you want to build an army, you need to recruit. Where do you start?
Realms.
Realms. Totally. You have to go to Realms, pitch your vision. That's your easiest channel from going from a purpose to a pool of people that are willing to contribute effort. Where else? How do you get more people? New fighters, absolutely. New fighters especially love the feeling of being included or targeted. You reaching out and saying, hey, I could use your help. Lots of new people don't get to feel that way. And that kind of sucks. And when Norcalia's army was at its peak, we did that to every new fighter. We're like, look, we need your help. The only way that we win fights as the Norcalian army is by having so many more people than the fact that all of their fighters have 7 years more experience than our fighters doesn't matter. Man, that requires a lot of bodies.
Boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground? Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
I was actually going to say other sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we get like Amcars and DAG fighters all the time.
Mm-hmm. And
HMB more recently.
Oh, and with the Norcalian army, like Norcalia was obviously spanning DAG and Bell, but we made it really clear those moots that we were putting together where the Norcalia army was practicing together, they were cross-guard realms.
Was cross gaming as big in the sport before that?
No.
Okay, because I noticed the cross game renaissance that I came into, and it was noticeably.
Yes. So Norcalia having the realms coming together, that was big and different. Also, West Coast is less emotionally invested in the split. All right, so as a field commander, your first objective of putting together an army should be getting the buy-in and participation of more people than you can micromanage. If you have 8 people or less, you have a team. You can lead them, you can tell them individually what to do, you can give them individual performance insight that you have. You should get those people, share your common goal, that's how you get their buy-in, and then start looking at the people that you have on hand and the people that you don't, and identifying the people that are going to be the staples of your army. The people that are really, really capable, that you know that you have to have, figure out how to get them in. And the people that are coming in that you aren't entirely sure of their capabilities, start getting a feel for their capabilities, for how you can utilize them best. Another really key way to get more people involved in your army is visibility. Be visible. Good place for that is Golden Gate Park. Get lots of people just walking through, put up a sign, Lots of people will ask you about what it is. But that visibility thing isn't just for attracting people that haven't done Belagarth before. If you are visible in your realm and doing good things and people see that, right, they're going to be more inclined to join your army to help your purpose because they already see the benefit that you're providing. Even when it is time to field, like the day that you are doing the event or battle or whatever you have, keep recruiting. I probably got in 2016 15 or 20 people to just join because they were from Bay Area but hadn't seen any of the rest of our cross-realm outreach, showed up to Battle for the Ring, said, hey, by the way, did you know there's a NorCal army and you are super welcome to fight with us? I think I got 6 archers that way. Like, that's a lot of killing.
That's a volley.
Yes. So that recruitment, it never really stops. You're going to have natural attrition. You need to replenish that talent. You always want your numbers to be growing.
Otherwise, they're
Yep. All right, so number 1 most important is recruiting. Number 2 is training. Why do you guys think training's so important?
gets everybody on the same page.
Good. Alignment. Yeah. What else?
It makes them feel like a team.
Oh, yeah. That feeling like a team, that's a really big deal.
You have a better idea of their capabilities.
Great. You actually get to exercise their capabilities. Yeah.
It can be a way to make or break morale.
We make or what?
Make or break morale.
Great. Yes, absolutely.
Stress test plus.
Yeah, and a lot of us preparing for those castle battles was stress testing. Was figuring out what we could and what we could not handle. Movement.
So important.
Oh, it's so important. Absolutely.
So not just moving as a unit, but knowing how the people next to you actually move.
Yeah.
And play off of them.
Yeah. So before you start training, your group will likely not really have an idea of how to work together. There's very few visions or goals out there that you can just put an army together that your group will come into it knowing how to work together. And figuring that out before you actually need to perform means that you can iron out any rough edges, any challenges that you run into in practice, instead of having it be a potential point of failure when you actually need to perform. There's also a hierarchy or progression to training. The way that it usually works in field command is you start off with your individuals learning how to use their kit. How a shield works, how a sword works, how a glaive works, bow, any equipment that they're personally using. Once they know how to use their kit, then you can start working on how they work together. This shieldman can block for the support weapon. The support weapon can kill everybody. Great. They actually kind of need to know a little bit about their kit first before you can hop into that, right? And that happens on both a micro and a macro level in armies. That's not just 2 people working together, right? You're going to have those micro groups working together, but it also could mean the entire body of your army working together. If your left flank keeps walking into your main line, that's going to be kind of hard for either team to do what they need to do. Right? So, second layer of that learning and training is how to work together. The third is, okay, we now know how to work together. How does us working together change or stay the same against varied opponents? What does that look like against a small group? Or maybe a small group that's highly talented fighting the EBF? A large group, it's probably not as large as you, like honor roll. Or the entire field is against you. It's everyone versus Norcalia, and you no longer have a numbers advantage. And so each of those scenarios of who you're going against is going to be different, and your group gets to react differently. You get to learn together your strengths and your weaknesses. And as a field commander, you should be looking out to those so that you can put your army in a position to be in more situations of their strengths and minimize the situations of your weaknesses. So I think somebody pointed that out, that stress testing and learning your capabilities, really, really good insight. The one that was subtle but incredibly important that I learned is training is an opportunity for your army to key in to your voice. Battle is really loud. And if you are yelling commands and your army can't hear you or hasn't trained under you, what I noticed is that over time, not only did I get louder, but more importantly, people learned to listen for my voice while they were fighting because we were training together so often. And that is incredibly foundationally important. It's this interesting aspect of human biology where as you practice listening for specific sounds, you get better at it. And so we started off with people not being able to hear or listen and thus not reacting very well, to people being able to have really pitched battles and being able to hear what I'm saying quite easily. Any other thoughts on training? Cool. The next one is the third most important, and probably, at least for me, the most boring, but also foundationally crucial, logistics. Anyone have ideas on what logistics is? Yeah.
Organizational planning around how you're getting together.
Great. What else?
How-tos.
How-tos. Love it.
Getting equipment to the event.
Oh, yeah.
The plan.
Uh-huh.
Whens and wheres.
Yeah. Yeah. Good way to put that. Whens and wheres. So, logistics is all of the effort and organization necessary to enable your army to accomplish your vision. Moving your army is core to this. If you take a look at the demographics of like the US Army, there's a lot of people that fight. There's a lot of people that support them fighting. Includes getting your army to practice the actual event itself, the battle itself, and all three of those are different, right? You can successfully get somebody to practice, but if they don't show up to the event or the battle that you need to perform, they're helpful in the greater scheme of maybe a subsequent battle, but not helpful for that battle. Same case, we actually had a lot of trouble 2 years ago just getting people onto the field for the battle. They were at the event, but the event was kind of changing realm battle times around, and there wasn't a clear line of communication for how people were informed when the realm battle actually was. So it was a mad scramble to get people on the field. You want to handle logistics preemptively as much as possible, and that's why I really appreciated the way you framed it as when and wheres. As much as possible, you want to have the when and where established with enough time that people can plan around it and expect it. Really great insight on logistics there. Next topic is politics. This is probably one of the more interesting ones. Definitely one of the ones that I've had more success with. Also, some of the more controversial. So, as a leader, one of your jobs should be to insulate your army from political bullshit so that they do not have to deal with it. And that kind of sucks as a leader.
What are we defining as political? Like what interactions with our people, interactions with organizations?
It could take a number of variety of faces. An interesting example that happened. So it was 2015. We were hopping onto the field, having crushed 2014. And this time, we hopped onto the field with a whole bunch of people from Numenor on our team that had been working with us and training us. And Cheeseheart comes out. He says, you know what? I don't respect your strength. How about instead of you with all of these mercenaries coming and fighting us, how about we just do the Andoril army versus the Norcalia army? No friends. And I said, you need more friends. That's what I named my blog. Cheese laughs about it to this day. There was an opportunity for that unhandled to become very toxic, right? That could have resulted in everybody stepping off the field, the Norcalian army being criticized, and a lack of confidence in, okay, well, what are we without our friends? Instead, it was a political conversation and situation that was handled in such a way that the Norcalian army came out of that feeling really good about itself, right? Mm-hmm. It was not something that the individuals of the Norcalian army had to deal with as a negative portion. Okay. That's what I'm talking about insulating your army from politics.
With memes.
With memes.
Laconic phrase.
The thing to say is, like, sport's been around for a while now. Everybody has some kind of history.
Mm-hmm.
And so politics is about learning to navigate these
Oh,
things
yeah.
you may not be aware of.
And I think that's a really great kind of description of politics as a whole. It's understanding, at the end of the day, everything that humans do is in some way political. Mm-hmm. There's humans involved. There's going to be feelings, agendas, desires. Every human thing is inherently political. Politics is, from a leadership perspective, understanding the political layout, the groups that are involved, how they interact with you, and how to navigate that. Because what you don't want is a situation that goes out of your control negatively, or then reflects on your army, comes up as an actual physical challenge instead of an untapped emotional challenge or energy that you can then channel. Good tangible example. Alrighty then. You could go ahead and have everybody on the field be your enemy, every other team. But what if instead you went and talked to what could be an opposing general and you say, look, I won't kill you if you won't kill me, and I'll see you at the end, and we could duke it out for first from there. How significantly does that change your position?
Dramatically.
Right?
Yeah.
A potential enemy turning into an ally into the last round, or maybe even further than that, straight up being an ally. And some of my most glorious victories have been making friends. Before or during the battle, we don't have to fight this out. You don't want to deal with my almost 100 person army. Don't.
Especially with small groups. Like if you have a larger group,
Yeah.
you know that there's a pretty skilled smaller group that you could deal with, but you take severe
It's costly.
losses. You could just make a temporary alliance and be like, look, let's deal with this later.
Yep.
The real victory is the friendship you made along the way.
Aww.
I do 50-man group combat online several
Yeah.
times a week. And
Yeah.
that is absolutely something we do every time.
Uh-huh.
You ally with the other stronger force
Yep.
so that you don't accidentally get taken out by one of the weaker.
And if you are one of the teams that is not making alliances, what would you say the probability of you winning is?
0.
It's just not really existent. But it's funny because even with how important that is, the politics is only like the 4th thing that I listed on the list. all of the other things are actually even more foundational than that, because if you can't even field an army, you don't get the ability. Yeah.
No bargaining chips.
If I can add on to that,
Yeah.
I like to extend that kind of philosophy to off-field conduct. Just always be making allies. Always
Yeah.
make friends with people that are around you, especially.
Totally agree.
Especially when you see other leaders, talk to them, get their perspectives.
Great. Love
That
it.
way, you're not just like rolling up on some guy randomly like, hey, what's up? I don't know you, but we're not going to kill you if you don't kill us.
Pre-existing relationship.
Yeah,
Applying
exactly.
this on the individual. You're talking
Yes.
about applying this on the individual level.
Yes. But being able to do that landscape analysis and understand where you fit politically is really important. Missteps in politics, especially when you look at at national governments, result in really, really challenging situations. So make sure that you are informed and have done your homework and thought on politics. If you go up to an opposing army and you say, hey, we won't kill you if you don't kill us, but it turns out that that army has had a 10-year relationship with the only other army on the field that's very positive, and you missed that, they probably were just blowing smoke up your ass, and they have no desire to break that 10-year alliance, and you're going to find that out the painful way. All right.
Our final classes will be starting.
Gonna let that happen.
Do, 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 I'll fast forward through this part.
Cool.
I'm playing the Jeopardy music. All right, we good now?
Nope. Area D.
Single blue with art in area D. These are the final classes of the day.
Do note that I will not be offended if any of y'all want to jump ship for a class. The people that we have out here are less accessible than I am, so please.
I'll just take off because I can only have a connection to someone here.
Cool. All right, so continuing on. Command hierarchy and backups. So we talked about micromanaging 8 people. So if you have an army of 50 people, you can't lead all 50 people. Ideally, you're going to want to make packages of work to delegate and hand that off such that they're going to be managing 8 people-ish. Norcalia hates hierarchy, so I had a lot of trouble doing this personally. The way that I handled that was I made it very informal, non-permanent, people that Norcalia individuals already trusted, and I made it elective. Say, hey, if you want to be involved in this portion, go work with this person. And I did that day of. Ideally, you would have primaries and secondaries for pretty much every single position. Yourself as a leader, an executive officer for who leads when you get shot, and then for each group of 8 people, a primary and secondary for it. I think that's all that I want to cover there, just because in Northern California, it is so unenjoyed. Does anybody have any other things they want to add on command hierarchy and backups?
That kind of goes along with establishing an inner circle, right?
No, well, okay, so in the ideal case, yes.
Okay.
In Norcalia, don't do that.
Okay.
Actively don't do that. That is how, so Norcalia will riot because people will feel alienated. So
Okay.
that inner circle approach is a great way to hemorrhage people here.
You'll literally like cut off. Those
Yeah.
people will just
Right.
cut off and die.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that you're not bringing this up because you don't field armies with significantly more than 70 people in them. So you don't. But if you did, you would presumably need multiple layers
Of hierarchy.
of hierarchy.
Yes.
And that's just not the way foam fighting is. I
Yeah,
guess, I'm guessing.
we're just not that big.
Yeah.
SCA may be big enough where you would need multiple layers,
Mm-hmm.
but really great insight is that at a certain point when you have so many people that you would have more than 8 sub-commanders,
Mm-hmm.
need to start talking about more organizational structure. No question.
Oh yeah, because then you're running more than 8 people.
Exactly.
I think that would also require more like preemptive planning and like permanency, which we
Yeah.
don't do well with.
I think a thing that I was thinking about earlier about one of the challenges of delegation is getting cut off from the core work, which I think is another thing.
Yeah.
If you're only managing sub-leaders, but we don't really have to worry about that too much.
Nope.
So,
All right, so we talked about organizational structure. Let's really apply that. After this discussion, I'm going to draw out what I think a normal anatomy of an army is. Why don't you guys throw out some ideas? How would you organize an army?
Like a bell army?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're talking about field command at this point, so we're off of leadership. We're down in field command area. How would you organize an army if you had one?
I would want archers to be broken down into small groups,
Okay,
preferably able to volley fire with each other.
cool.
I've never to this day seen
That, yep,
that could feed into like a goal of leadership to
sure.
be able to volley fire.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would want to see flanks, like
Uh-huh.
an organized group on each flank,
Good.
both to do flanking maneuvers and to respond coherently
Good.
to threats on the flank.
Good.
We're talking to win or for fun.
That depends on what kind of leader.
To win, you do
Uh-huh.
the classic strongest 8 shield and borders with supports, and then you build additional 8-man teams with archers and ranged off of that
Okay.
to where they can be moved around.
8-man
and-
independent functional teams.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then for fun, I want like 40 people, all trained as a unit,
Uh-huh.
to just run up and throw rocks.
Glorious. By the way, Siege of Sunspear, I brought 30 rocks to a castle battle. They charged in. They got hit in the head a lot.
We also brought face masks for when they threw them back at us.
Yeah.
That's called planning.
Yeah, that's
So you wanted a shield wall here?
yeah. Shield wall in the center, like.
Okay, cool. Gotcha.
You have your core shield wall that can also, like, if people in that start falling, you can. Oh,
Nice.
our poles are gone. Bring in 2 poles out of the flanking groups.
Mhm.
Divide that flanking group into those 4 people go with them. You can kind of break them up as it goes.
Awesome.
Phalanx.
It's the enemy.
The phalanx. Yeah.
Ta-da!
Awesome.
So one thing
Yeah, there you go.
that I don't have a clear answer on is when you're organizing a shield wall, like especially for the center of the shield wall, you don't want one person,
on the
like
other side of the
presumably there's
archers,
going to be
maybe
maybe
reserves.
20
Just in
people
case
in the
somebody
center
punches
here
through
Sure.
the hole.
who are decidedly not flanking, right?
Yep.
It's going to be, I feel like it would be awkward to break that up into like 8 or smaller person units.
Sure.
There's going to be, like, the borders between them aren't going to be distinct from the centers of these
So
units.
that would work really well. The breaking up would work really well if you have a lot of good independent commanders, because that independent group is going to be hard to organize as a whole. Blackwater does that really well.
Yeah.
Blackwater has groups that they'll just coalesce into, and people will die around them. They don't do a lot of top-down command.
But
I can
they
attest.
also they have the 8 random flankers who suddenly reform and
And death happens.
Actually, it's actually a tactic that has a name. It's called the swarm of bees.
that makes so much sense. That's
All
what
right.
They
it
yell
feels like.
bees, and everyone just splits up and does their thing and comes back together.
Squeaky, can you erase? I'm going to draw up, at least in my mind. Actually, we can just use the back of the board. Perfect.
Oh, okay.
Hey, look at that. I'm
Here,
going to draw
have
up
this.
what I think is an ideal setup, or at least what I've run with success. Can I take your spot, Monster?
Yeah.
Or maybe I'll just hang out here.
Or you can dictate and I can draw.
I don't know if I can dictate that well,
All
so
right.
we'll try not. All right, so enemies
It's just a communication exercise.
enemies are this way.
Okay.
You have your main line. You have some flanks.
Doing something like this at home. You know, if I could, right?
You have
But I mean,
yourself
I find that
with
between the events I
some archers. Wow, that's the worst like A ever. And one of the things that I didn't hear anybody say.
Ronan said reserves.
Oh, Ronan did say reserves? Okay. So let's talk about. So for me, this is the basic anatomy of an army. Let's talk about what the composition and responsibility of each of these things are. Your main line's job is to stay alive. If your main line is dead, that's a big problem for the entirety of the army, right? It should be predominantly shieldmen with a defensive mentality, enabling a splattering of your line support weapons. So I'm not talking about those 6-foot min reds. I'm talking about long 8-foot pole arms that are going to get into the opposing line. You have 2 flanks. Flanks are a great place to put those min reds. The fighting is going to be less compact. This is where a lot of your Florentiners are going to go. Very highly mobile or aggressively minded shieldmen hop in there.
Javies too.
What's that?
Javies too.
No, I like Javies on the main line.
Okay.
Yeah. But you can have them on there. I just find that Javies, I find, are more useful and accessible when people stop moving, and the flanks are dealing with people that are moving.
That's true.
You are in the back in a nice pocket. This is a pocket that is made by your flanks, who are responsible, not just, as you pointed out, for engaging on the flanks, but defending the flanks, right? Your archers are in the back, raining hell. Most important of all of these groups are your reserves. If you are looking at an army and trying to figure out where to allocate people, some of your smartest, best, and brightest should be in your reserves. Your reserves are responsible for a few things. They're responsible for keeping your ass alive. They're responsible for keeping the archers' asses alive. They're responsible for, when anything else in this is failing, going and stemming the flow of failure. So as a result, you've got the hold on that. As a result, your reserves need to be the people that can independently of your command assess the situation and status of your army and do something about it without having to talk to you about it. And that requires years of practice.
Is there going to be a lot of your secondaries?
I don't usually run a secondary line.
No, I mean in our command structure, we've got our primaries and our secondaries. Are secondaries
No,
gonna be reserved?
for each of these things, you should have a commander. So a mainline commander, maybe 2. For a flank commander and a secondary flank commander for each of the flanks.
Okay.
An archer commander, probably less important to do a secondary archer commander unless you're doing really cool, good stuff with like volleys. And then one of your reservists should be your secondary.
Specifically for archery, interesting point that Bogan had way back when is he was our commander for a short period of time and I was an archer, and he would have all the archers break into groups of 3. Just find 3 people, and one person would call a target and then do a countdown, and everyone would shoot at that target.
Yeah.
So it's a really easy way to organize without actually organizing.
So going back to reservists, your reservists should be able to look at the main line and see when something's failing and you got a hole and plug the hole. They should be able to be fast. You should have some reservists that are fast enough that when somebody gets into the back line, the reservist can immediately respond and put that person down before too much damage is accrued. So you actually need some variance in your reservists. You want a big guy to go and plug the hole. So when there's like 3 guys stemming in, you see that big guy running at them, and you're like, whoa, maybe we'll slow down. You want a fast guy back there to go ahead. You have shy in your back line. You're not going to find a lot of people that are going to be able to stand up to shy, but slow him down so that multiple people can deal with him, right? Your reservists, Sir Keg told me they're the most important portion of your army. You should be reserving 10% of your army as reservists. He was absolutely right. 10% is a huge, huge commitment. But when you think about the alternative, you know that something in your army is going to fail. You do not know what. You want that 10% to be ready to deal with that failure, whatever it is. So you either have that 10% dispersed among all of this and unable to respond to that failure, or they're in their back waiting and watching for that failure. Lastly, one of the best things about reservists is they almost ignore your commands.
They think about your commands before executing them.
Even deeper than that. They actually pay a lot of attention to commands and do the opposite. So let's say that I'm telling the army to turn and go this way. What does your reservist do?
Watch the back.
They turn that way. They go from here to here, as you guys are going here, and they mean mug everybody in your back line. This is something that the Numenorians do as an art. Numenorians don't have to fight you to intimidate you. They'll just look at you funny. And if you're staring down a fully armored Numenorian, you just kind of don't want that fight, right? Even if you got like 4 of your buddies, man, that kind of looks like that's your reservist. Is the people that will fan out a little bit, keep the back safe, move counter to how your army is moving so that you can execute your move.
Somebody who could zone really well.
Zoning,
Yeah.
excellent. Yes, absolutely. Okay. The last thing that I want to talk about, composition of your army, that I found incredibly effective. Where's another color?
Blue?
Blue? Yeah, Mom says blue's best. All right. Is an asymmetric composition. So right now, this composition's symmetric. It has 2 flanks. One of the things that I used to absolutely brutal effect was having an offensive flank and a defensive flank.
Yeah.
Because whenever an external commander looks at your army, they're going to see the same number of people in both of those. And unless they really understand your personnel, which almost never happens in Belagarth to this extent, they will be completely surprised by this fact. And so what I would do is I would have a flank with some of my less fast, more defensively talented people, and I would tell that flank commander, you're the defensive flank. Your job is primarily keeping the main line alive. And I'd have an offensive flank on the other side, and their job is looking for opportunities. They're going to be lighter on the mainline defense, and as I am ordering my army around, I am going to put my defensive flanks in a place where I want to be defensive, such as in the center of the field, and my offensive flank in the place where I want to be cleaning up and murdering, such as the edge of the field. Because then my offensive flank can use that edge of the field as zoning, and I want everything from my army to the edge of the field to be either my army or dead. And that lack of symmetry probably killed thousands of people in maybe 1,000 people in the course of running the Norcali army. So, any questions about what I see as kind of an ideal anatomy of an army?
You can go over hammer and anvil?
Was that?
You gonna do hammer anvil?
No, Hammer and Anvil was... So, the first... 2014, the first year that I ran this, I ran Hammer and Anvil because I started that conversation with, okay, how many of y'all want to be flankers? Half the people raised their hand. Oh, God. We can't have half an army of flankers. So I ran a main line, the Anvil, and a whole big group of flankers, the Hammer. It worked pretty well. I would never build an army that way again.
Did the hammer end up being kind of a chaos ball?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and it just
absolutely.
went like this through people.
But it was fun, and it
Oh,
was
it was really fun.
the
More of a
best
needle.
way for us to utilize a group that previously had no experience working in tight mainline battle conditions.
Yeah. The Vanguard.
The next thing that I want to go over is individuals as tools. When you look at your army, you need to not see each individual person's capabilities. You need to see a general category of what they are useful for. Otherwise, you will be unable to take a snap picture look of what the current status of the field is and be able to render judgment. If I'm spending all my time thinking about, well, Zale can use a 9-foot pole, but also an 8-foot pole, and man, he's really good with that new axe that he just made, that's too much mental overhead. Instead, I made categories of fighters. Do y'all want to throw out some ideas for like some categories of fighters that you would use? Pole, great,
Archer.
great.
Defensive sword and mortar.
Great.
Or offensive sword and
Yes.
Tower shield user.
Yup.
Neat.
And so
Juggernauts at all.
when we were at the prime of what I think like the Norcalia Army's capabilities were, I was maintaining logistical lists of everybody that was going to every event, every role that I could classify them for. So I knew going into the battle the rough composition of my army, because it mattered if 8 of my defensive shieldmen were now working with pole arms as their main. Or it mattered if I was going to be bringing half of my archers instead of the usual archer complement. And that made a difference for how I would use the army and the situations that I would put them in. This is some of the logistical work that I'm talking about. Very, very important. The categories that I came up with were walls, which is what I called my defensive shieldmen, archers, supports. I didn't find a useful enough distinction between pole arms and glaives. Now it might be the right time.
Yeah.
Shock troopers, which were my reserves, flankers, and slayers. Those slayers were my offensive shieldmen. People that I'm gonna throw in flanks.
So kill their offense.
Yes. Even as you start to think about people this way, there's a lot of nuance to this. One, don't share how you're categorizing people. People don't like to be categorized. It's kind of fucking rude. Don't share the categories. Do listen to what they want to be. You are going to have more success enabling somebody to do what they want to do, even in opposition to something that they are good at. So if you have a really, really good polearm, and that person's like, look, I want a sword and board, you'll have more success enabling them to sword and board better. Listen so much for what they want to be. Don't let using individuals as tools remove the fact that these people are human. They have feelings. You can't just treat, this is not advice to treat them like crap. This is advice to simplify your vision of the field and what is out there. And so, as a consequence of that, don't ever send one of these people as tools into a situation that is intentionally dangerous.
Yes.
If you are ordering your people into a situation that you wouldn't put yourself in, you're doing it wrong. Now, that's not put yourself in as I'm not skilled enough to handle that situation. Sure, you can go ahead and send your good people into a tough fight, but a dangerous fight? No, absolutely not. You are doing something wrong. Lose the battle at that point. This is about managing an army. This is about safety. This is about having an army after you come off of the field. If you send your army into a situation where you're doing like a headlong charge across a bridge battle and it's going to be nasty, find a different fight. Don't take that. Let the other group charge into you. Lots of options for keeping people safe. Once you have an understanding of the composition of your personnel and your ideal composition of your army, you can start doing mental drills. What happens if the opposing force looks like this? What happens if they do that? When I was preparing to use Norcalia for the Norcalian army in 2014 and 2016, I was doing those drills every day, coming up with every possible scenario that I could come up with. So that I was pinging other people too. Bogan and I were playing with Warhammer 20K figures. I was talking to a bunch of different knights of how would you counter this? What would you do? And having them pick apart my composition so I knew what to do and how to react. And with that, you can start developing special weapons and strategies, things that are special or unique to your army. In 1 year, it was the fact that we had almost 20 really talented archers. And so my job was keeping the archers safe with the army, and the archers' job was killing everything in front of them. It was one of the years we had Numenor there, and so our composition was pretty heavy in this back line, who we destroyed. It was glorious. Bringing out rocks in a castle battle. For a while, Norcalia had a javelin stash that I think is with Princess Socrates for now. If you've got 20 people with javies, even if they're not great with them, that makes a difference. It is my personal opinion that any advantage that you actively put effort to make happen is an advantage that you are entitled to use as long as it was within safety. This is a gnomish perspective. There's lots of perspectives on honor and a good stand-up fight. I am completely disinterested in a good, fair fight, because good, fair fights are fights that you have the possibility to lose. And with everything that I've talked about, the goal here is to win before anybody steps on the field. That's not a fair fight. That's a fight that I engineer. That's the end of the second section. Guys have any questions?
When do we start?
All right, so the third section is going to be a little bit of conversation, and then we're going to hop on the field and try it, and then we're going to come back and talk about what happened. Hope to see you guys. Let's take a 10-minute break, and I'll see you then.